They called her princess a bitter taunt meant for a weak girl who cried too easily, someone who didn't belong in the military. On her first day at the training camp, 6 Marines roared with laughter when they saw her hands trembling so badly she couldn't even load a magazine. But they had no idea that behind those tear-stained eyes lay an invisible wound and a silent promise. She would never let anyone crush her again. 3 years later, Princess returned this time as a Navy SEAL, and it took her only 40 seconds to take down all 6 of them. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Elena Brooks stepped onto the training grounds at Camp Pendleton. At 20 years old, she stood 5'4" in her worn sneakers, her frame lean but undeniably small compared to the towering figures around her. She came from a military family. Her father had served 2 tours, her grandfather before him, but everyone always said she was too soft for this life. The pre-training program was designed to weed out the weak before they even reached the real selection process. Elena knew this. She'd prepared for months, running until her lungs burned, doing push-ups until her arms gave out. But standing there, surrounded by dozens of candidates who looked like they'd been carved from granite, doubt crept in like fog. "All right, listen up." The instructor's voice cut through the morning air. "Today's assessment is simple. Load your weapon, run the obstacle course, and complete the combat drill. Anyone who can't keep up can leave right now." Elena's hands shook as she picked up the rifle. It wasn't the weight she'd practiced with her brother's old service weapon countless times. It was the eyes. Dozens of them, watching, judging, waiting for her to fail. 6 Marines stood off to the side, already finished with their assessment. They wore their uniforms with the casual confidence of men who'd earned their place. The tallest one, Corporal Hayes, had a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that seemed to find humor in everything. Elena fumbled with the magazine. Once, twice, her fingers wouldn't cooperate. The metal slipped, clattered to the ground. The laughter started immediately. "Look at that," Hayes called out, his voice carrying across the field. "Can't even load a weapon. What is this, summer camp?" The other 5 Marines joined in, their laughter sharp and cruel. Elena felt her face flush red. She bent down to retrieve the magazine, her hands now shaking worse than before. When she finally managed to seat it properly, tears had started to blur her vision. "Oh man, she's crying," another Marine said. A guy with a buzz cut and a wide grin, literally crying on day 1. "Somebody get the princess a tissue," Hayes drawled, and the nickname landed like a punch to the gut. "Princess." The word echoed in Elena's ears as she completed her run dead last. It followed her through the obstacle course where she slipped and fell into the mud. It haunted her during the combat drill where her punches looked pathetic next to the others. That night, lying in her bunk with bruises forming on her knees and tears still wet on her cheeks, Elena made a promise. Not out loud, not even in words she could fully articulate, but somewhere deep in her chest, in a place that felt both broken and impossibly strong, she swore, never again. She would never give anyone the power to make her feel small. She would never be their punchline. The nickname Princess would mean something different by the time she was done. Elena's brother, Thomas Brooks, died on a Tuesday. She wasn't there when it happened, some classified operation in a country whose name the government wouldn't release. She only learned about it when 2 officers appeared at her immense door, their faces carved from stone, their words rehearsed and hollow. "Your brother was a hero," they told her. "He died serving his country." But what they didn't say, what she heard in every pitying glance from family, friends, and distant relatives at the funeral, was the unspoken comparison. Thomas was the strong one. Thomas was the real soldier. Elena? She could never measure up. Thomas had been a Navy SEAL, one of the best in his class. Growing up, Elena had worshipped him the way he could do 100 push-ups without breaking a sweat, the way he spoke about his training with a mixture of pride and humility. He joined at 18 and never looked back. She remembered their last conversation, 3 months before his death. They'd sat on the porch of their childhood home, drinking cheap beer and watching the sunset. "You thinking about enlisting?" Thomas had asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Everyone says I'm too soft for it," Elena had replied, picking at the label on her bottle. Thomas had been quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to her, his expression serious. "Elle, I've seen guys twice your size fall A during training. Size doesn't mean anything. Being tough doesn't mean never being scared or never crying. It means doing what needs to be done even when you're scared, even when you cry." "I cry a lot, Tommy." "I know." He'd smiled then, sad and knowing. "But you're stronger than you think. You always have been." Now, standing at his grave with rain mixing with her tears, Elena replayed those words over and over. Everyone at the funeral treated her with kid gloves, like she was fragile glass that might shatter. Her mother kept asking if she was okay, if she needed to sit down, if this was all too much. It was too much. But Elena didn't want to be protected from it. That night, alone in her room with Thomas's old Navy SEAL Trident medal in her hands, Elena made her decision. She pulled up the application for BUD divided by S Basic Underwater Demolition divided by SEAL training on her laptop. Everyone said it was the hardest military training in the world. Most men didn't make it through. No one expected women to even try. She filled out every field with shaking hands. When she hit submit, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope exactly, but determination. Cold and hard and unbreakable. If she failed, at least she'd fail trying. And if she succeeded, she'd prove that being princess didn't mean being weak. The Pacific Ocean at 4 in the morning was colder than Elena had imagined possible. BUD divided by S began with a simple test. Could you survive being uncomfortable? Could you function when every nerve in your body screamed for relief? The instructors didn't care about your feelings. They cared about whether you'd quit. Elena stood in the surf zone with 47 other candidates, the waves crashing against their legs, the water temperature hovering around 55 degrees. They'd been there for 30 minutes. They'd be there for another hour. Brooks. Instructor Chief Rawlings shouted over the roar of the ocean. He was a compact man with eyes like chips of ice. You shaking? Yes, Instructor Chief. Elena's teeth chattered so hard she could barely form words. You gonna quit? No, Instructor Chief. We'll see. The first week eliminated 15 candidates. The second week took another 8. Elena watched men who looked like they could bench press cars ring the bell, the brass bell mounted on a post that meant surrender, that meant going home. She never touched it. Every morning started at 4 a.m. with a 4-mile run in soft sand. Then came the obstacle course, then ocean swims, then log PT carrying massive wooden logs as a team until your shoulders felt like they'd separate from your body. Then more running, more swimming, more everything until your body became something distant and mechanical. Pain just another piece of data to process and ignore. Elena finished near the bottom in almost every physical test. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the strongest. But she was always there, always moving forward, even when her lungs burned and her muscles turned to water. Princess still hanging in there. One of the instructors remarked during a particularly brutal obstacle course run. Elena had just completed the rope climb on her 3rd attempt, her hands raw and bleeding. Thought she'd be gone by week 1. Chief Rawlings watched her stumble toward the next obstacle, her legs barely supporting her weight. She's got something, he said quietly. Haven't figured out what yet. The breaking point came during a night navigation exercise. Teams of 6 had to find their way through 12 miles of rough terrain using only a compass and map, carrying a 60-pound ruck each. Elena's team was paired with 5 men, all of whom stood over 6 feet tall. 8 miles in, one of them, a former college football player named Davis, collapsed. Heat exhaustion, despite the cool night air. His body simply gave up. We have to leave him, one teammate said. Get the instructors on the radio. Elena knelt beside Davis. He was barely conscious, his skin clammy. No, she said. Brooks, we don't have time. I said no. She looked up at them, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. We're a team. We finished together. They fashioned a stretcher from their packs and took turns carrying Davis. It added 2 hours to their time. They finished dead last, but they finished together. In the debriefing, Chief Rawlings didn't mention their time. He mentioned their decision. This, he said, pointing at Elena's team, is what a SEAL does. You don't leave people behind. You don't take the easy path. Brooks made the call. The rest of you followed. That's leadership. Later, Davis found Elena in the mess hall. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded, too exhausted for words. But for the first time since arriving at BUD divided by S, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she belonged. Hell Week began on Sunday night with a simulated explosion. Instructors fired artillery simulators, sprayed candidates with freezing water, and screamed instructions that were impossible to follow. This was the point. Hell Week wasn't about physical fitness. It was about breaking your mind, seeing who could function when function seemed impossible. 5.5 days, 4 hours of sleep total. Continuous physical training in the coldest, wettest, most miserable conditions the instructors could devise. Elena lost track of time somewhere around Tuesday. Everything blurred together: the sand, the water, The endless runs, the log PT, the boat carries. Her hands developed sores that became open wounds. Her legs cramped so badly, she'd wake up screaming during their precious few minutes of rest. She hallucinated, seeing her brother standing on the beach, watching her. By Wednesday night, 38 candidates remained from the original class of 67. The brass bell rang every few hours as another person decided they'd had enough. During a particularly brutal surf passage evolution, Elena's boat crew got flipped by a wave. The water was chaos, dark and freezing, and filled with thrashing limbs. Elena went under, felt the weight of the ocean pressing down, her lungs screaming for air. For a moment, just a moment, she thought about letting go, about sinking, about how easy it would be to just stop fighting. Then she remembered Thomas, his funeral, the way everyone had looked at her with pity, the Marines who'd called her princess like it was the worst thing she could be. Elena clawed her way to the surface, gasping and choking. She helped pull 3 of her teammates back to shore. They remounted the boat and went back out. Thursday morning, one of the remaining candidates, a guy named Morrison who'd been near the top of the class, approached her during a brief break. They were both covered in sand, shivering, barely human. "Why don't you quit?" he asked. Not cruel, just genuinely curious. "Everyone can see how much you're suffering." Elena's lips were so chapped they bled when she spoke. "I already quit once," she said. "I quit on myself for 20 years. I'm not doing it again." Morrison Keat, 6 hours later. Hell Week ended Friday afternoon with a tradition. The instructors gathered the remaining candidates, 22 of them, and told them to secure the boats one last time. Then Chief Rawlings said the words everyone had been waiting for. "Hell Week is secured." Elena stood with the others, barely able to process what he'd said. Her feet were destroyed, wrapped in bandages that were soaked through with blood and seawater. Her hands looked like hamburger meat. She'd lost 12 pounds from her already slight frame. But she was standing. "Brooks," Chief Rawlings said, walking over to her. "Surprised?" "No, Instructor Chief." Her voice was hoarse from shouting commands over wind and waves. He almost smiled. "Good. You shouldn't be. You earned this." That night, in her rack with every muscle in her body screaming, Elena allowed herself to cry. But this time, the tears felt different. Not from pain or humiliation or fear, from pride. 6 months after Hell Week, Elena stood in formation with her graduating bud divided by S-Class, receiving her Trident, the gold pin that marked her as a Navy SEAL. Of the 67 who'd started, only 19 finished. Elena was one of 3 women who'd attempted the program. She was the only one still standing. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Her mother attended, crying throughout. Her father stood rigid and proud, finally seeing her as more than his soft daughter. But the person Elena wished could be there most was Thomas. Assignment to an actual SEAL team came next. Elena was placed with Team 7, a unit with a reputation for professionalism and a track record of successful missions. Her new commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Pierce, was a veteran with 15 years in the teams. "I don't care that you're a woman," Pierce told her during their first meeting. His office was sparse, decorated only with a map of the Middle East and a photo of his team. "I care whether you can do the job, pull your weight, have your teammates' backs, and we won't have problems. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Report to training at 0500 tomorrow. We're working on close quarters combat drills." The reality of being a SEAL hit Elena during her first week with the team. This wasn't training anymore. This was operational preparation. Her teammates included men who'd been in the teams for a decade, who'd seen combat, who'd lost friends. They were professional but distant, watching her with the same skeptical eyes she'd faced at Camp Pendleton. Close quarters combat became Elena's proving ground. In BUD divided by S, the focus had been on endurance and mental toughness. Now she needed to be lethal. The hand-to-hand combat training was brutal and technical: how to disarm an opponent, how to kill with your bare hands if necessary, how to move through buildings, clearing rooms. Elena was smaller than everyone else in her team. In a straight test of strength, she'd lose every time. But her instructor, a compact Hawaiian SEAL named Kalani, taught her a different approach. "Use their size against them," Kalani said, demonstrating a joint lock that used leverage instead of muscle. "Speed, precision, angles, that's your advantage. A big guy swings slow, you don't be where he's swinging." Elena threw herself into the training. Every spare moment was spent drilling techniques, studying angles, learning how to turn weakness into strength. She took hits, plenty of them. Her ribs got bruised, her nose broken during a sparring session. But she kept coming back. Brooks is getting scary good at this. One of her teammates, a lanky Texan named Rodriguez, mentioned during a break. Took me down 3 times this morning. Size doesn't matter much when someone knows what they're doing, Kalani replied, watching Elena work through a drill with another teammate. She's got the fundamentals down. Now she just needs experience. That experience came faster than expected. 3 months after joining Team 7, they received orders for their first deployment. The mission briefing took place in a secured room aboard the USS Bataan, somewhere in the Mediterranean. Lieutenant Commander Pierce stood at the front with a satellite image displayed on the screen behind him. Intelligence indicates that an American journalist, Marcus Chen, is being held in this compound. Pierce pointed to a cluster of buildings in what looked like an abandoned warehouse district. Hostile forces, number unknown. Our job is to get Chen out alive. Questions? Elena's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. This was real. People with guns who wanted to kill them. No instructors to stop things if they went wrong. Rules of engagement? Rodriguez asked. Weapons free if we encounter resistance. But Chen is the priority. We're not starting a war. We're extracting 1 civilian. The insertion happened at 0200 hours. 2 helicopters dropped Team 7 2 clicks from the target. They moved through the darkness in tactical formation. Elena positioned 3rd in the stack. Every sense was heightened: the weight of her weapon, the sound of boots on dirt, the way moonlight caught the edges of buildings. They breached the compound using a shape charge on a side door. Flashbang grenades went in first, followed by the team. Elena moved through the smoke and chaos, her weapon up, scanning for threats. Clear. Clear. Contact right. Gunfire erupted. Elena dropped to cover behind a concrete barrier, her training taking over. She acquired her target, a fighter 40 meters away, illuminated by muzzle flash. Breathe. Squeeze. The rifle bucked once. The target dropped. Good shot, Brooks. Pierce's voice in her earpiece. They worked through the building methodically. Elena's job was to watch their 6, make sure nothing came up behind them while the team pushed forward. It was unglamorous but crucial. They found Chen in a basement room, bound and blindfolded but alive. Rodriguez cut him free while Elena maintained security on the stairwell. That's when she heard footsteps above them, moving fast. Hostile coming down, she called out. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Elena didn't hesitate. 2 rounds, center mass. The hostile tumbled down the stairs, weapon clattering. Everyone move, Pierce commanded. The extraction was chaos running through dark alleys with Chen stumbling between them. Sporadic gunfire from multiple directions, the sound of helicopters incoming. But they made it. Everyone made it. On the flight back to the ship, Rodriguez bumped fists with Elena. That shot you made, the one at 40 meters in the smoke? I barely saw that guy. Nice work. Pierce caught her eye and nodded once. It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from him, it meant everything. Later, alone on the deck watching the sun rise over the water, Elena let herself process what had happened. She'd been in combat, she'd taken a life. The weight of it sat heavy in her chest, but she knew she'd do it again if needed. To protect her team, to complete the mission. Princess felt like a different person now. Someone from another lifetime. 3 years after that humiliating first day at Camp Pendleton, Elena returned to the base for a joint training exercise between SEAL teams and Marine units. She was 23 now, lean muscle covering her frame, her face bearing the weathered look of someone who'd spent countless hours in the sun and wind. She'd just finished a morning workout in the base gym when she heard the voices. Familiar voices, though it took her a moment to place them. Man, I'm telling you, that new policy about women in special operations is bullshit, one voice said. Lowering standards just to hit some quota. Elena turned. 6 Marines stood near the weight racks, all of them looking exactly how she remembered, maybe a bit older, but still carrying themselves with that icular brand of Marine arrogance. Corporal Hayes, now Sergeant Hayes, based on the stripes, and his 5 buddies who'd laughed along that first day. They hadn't noticed her yet. I heard they let some girl through BUD divided by S, another Marine said, the one with the buzz cut. Probably gave her special treatment. Had to, Hayes replied. No way a woman makes it through Hell Week without the instructors going easy. Elena felt a cold smile cross her face. She walked over, her footsteps deliberate. Excuse me, Sergeant Hayes? He turned, squinting at her. Yeah? Do I know you? Camp Pendleton. 3 years ago. Pre-training assessment. She watched recognition slowly dawn in his eyes. You called me princess. Hayes's expression shifted surprise, then discomfort, then defensive dismissal. Oh, yeah, I remember. So you actually made it through training, huh? Good for you. His tone suggested he didn't believe she'd earned it. Navy SEAL, Team 7, Elena said calmly. 3 deployments, 6 operations. The other Marines had stopped talking, all of them staring at her now. One of them, the guy who'd made the joke about tissues, laughed nervously. Look, no offense, but you think I got special treatment, Elena finished. You think the standards were lowered. You think I'm here because of politics, not capability. Hayes shrugged. I mean, realistically, let's test it. Elena's voice was quiet but carried weight. You and your 5 friends here. Hand-to-hand combat drill. Full gear, real techniques. If you're right about me getting special treatment, should be easy to prove. The silence stretched out. Hayes looked at his friends, then back at Elena. His pride wouldn't let him back down, especially not in front of his unit. Fine, he said. But when we win, you admit you didn't earn that trident. And when I win, Elena replied, you tell everyone the truth about what happened today. Deal? Deal. They set it up for that afternoon in one of the training facilities, a padded room used for close-quarters combat drills. Word spread quickly. By the time Elena arrived, at least 30 people had gathered to watch, including several of her SEAL teammates. Rodriguez pulled her aside. You sure about this, Brooks? That's 6 guys, all of them trained. I'm sure. Kalani appeared on her other side. Remember what I taught you. Speed and precision. They'll underestimate you. Use it. The 6 Marines entered wearing their standard PT gear. Hayes led the way, cracking his knuckles like this was going to be easy. Like she was still the scared girl who'd dropped a magazine 3 years ago. Elena stood in the center of the room, calm and centered. Ready whenever you are, princess, Hayes said with a smirk. She smiled. 40 seconds. That's all I need. Someone started a timer. The first Marine rushed her with textbook aggression straight-line attack, reaching for a grab. Elena sidestepped, caught his extended arm, used his momentum against him. A sharp twist, a pivot, and he was face down on the mat, his arm locked at an angle that would dislocate if he moved. Elapsed time, 4 seconds. The second and third came together, trying to flank her. Elena released the first Marine and dropped low, sweeping the legs of the one on her right. As he fell, she used his shoulder as a springboard, launching herself at the third. Her elbow connected with his solar plexus. He went down gasping. Elapsed time, 11 seconds. The fourth Marine was smarter. He circled, looking for an opening. But smart didn't matter when you telegraphed every move. Elena saw his weight shift an instant before he committed to a tackle. She met him halfway, deflected his momentum with a forearm, and drove her knee into his midsection. As he doubled over, she transitioned to a standing guillotine choke. He tapped frantically. Elapsed time, 19 seconds. The 5th and 6th Marines, one of them was the buzzcut guy who'd laughed loudest that first day, attacked simultaneously, trying to overwhelm her with numbers. Elena became a blur of motion. Block, strike, pivot. She used the 5th Marine as a shield against the 6th, then swept both their legs in a movement so fluid it looked choreographed. They hit the mat hard. Elena transitioned to an armbar on the 5th before he could recover, hyperextending his elbow just enough to make her point without causing injury. He yelped and tapped. The 6th Marine started to rise. Elena was already moving. She caught him in a triangle choke from the side, her legs locking around his neck and arm. He struggled for 3 seconds before tapping. Elapsed time, 32 seconds. That left Hayes. He'd been watching the whole thing with growing disbelief. Now he stood alone, his 5 friends groaning on the mat, and the cocky smile had completely vanished from his face. Come on, Sergeant, Elena said softly. Don't disappoint me now. Hayes came at her with everything he had. He was strong, well-trained, and desperate not to be humiliated. Under other circumstances, he might have lasted longer. Elena slipped his first punch, blocked the second, and saw the opening he'd created by overcommitting. She drove forward, got inside his guard, and executed a perfect judo throw. Hayes's back hit the mat with enough force to knock the wind from his lungs. Before he could recover, Elena had transitioned to a mounted position, her forearm across his throat with just enough pressure to make breathing difficult. Tap, she said. Hayes tried to buck her off. Elena applied more pressure. Tap. His hand slapped the mat twice. Elena released him immediately and stood up. The The timer showed 38 seconds. The room was completely silent. Hayes lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, his chest heaving. The other 5 Marines were in various states of recovery, all of them looking like they'd been hit by a truck. Elena walked to the center of the room and turned to face Hayes as he slowly sat up. "You asked what I am," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I'm what you said I'd never be. I'm the person you laughed at. I'm Princess, and I earned every bit of this trident." She turned and walked toward the door. The crowd edged silently. Rodriguez was grinning. Kalani nodded with approval. Behind her, she heard Hayes's voice. "Quieter now. We really screwed up with you, didn't we?" Elena paused but didn't turn around. "Yeah, you did. But thank you. For what?" "For giving me something to prove." The video went viral within the base before Elena even made it back to her quarters. Someone had recorded the whole thing on their phone, 38 seconds of Elena systematically dismantling 6 Marines without breaking a sweat. By evening, it had spread to other bases. By the next morning, it was being discussed in Pentagon briefings. Elena's commanding officer called her in. She expected a reprimand for participating in an unsanctioned combat demonstration. Instead, Lieutenant Commander Pierce just looked at her with something approaching amusement. "You're aware that you've become a recruiting video, right?" he said. "Sir? Naval Special Warfare Command is getting calls from women who saw your performance, asking about BUD divided by S applications." Pierce leaned back in his chair. "Higher-ups are debating whether to officially release the footage or bury it. Either way, you've made an impression. I just wanted to prove a point, sir. You proved it. Question is, what happens next?" What happened next was unexpected. The 6 Marines requested a formal meeting with Elena through official channels. She almost declined, but curiosity won out. They met in a conference room neutral territory. The 6 of them sat on one side of the table, Elena on the other. Hayes did the talking. "We wanted to apologize," he said without preamble. "Not just for 3 years ago. For everything we said, everything we thought. We were wrong. You were." Elena agreed. "Can I ask you something?" Hayes continued. "That first day, when we called you Princess, did it really hurt that much?" Elena considered the question. "Yes. I was already scared, already doubting myself. You took that fear and made it 10 times worse. I went back to my bunk that night and cried for an hour straight." The Marines looked uncomfortable, as they should. "But," Elena continued, "that humiliation also changed me. It made me realize that I'd spent my whole life letting other people define my worth. I was tired of being scared, tired of being weak, so in a weird way, you gave me the push I needed." "That doesn't make it right," the buzz-cut Marine said. His name was Corporal Jensen, she'd learned. "We were assholes." "Yeah, you were." Elena smiled slightly. "But people change. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. Maybe you're not either." They talked for another hour. The Marines asked about BUD divided by S, about Hell Week, about what it was like being a woman in the teams. Elena answered honestly, the good, the bad, the moments she'd wanted to quit, the moments she'd felt invincible. As the meeting ended, Hayes stood and extended his hand. Elena shook it. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've never seen anyone move like that. You're the real deal." "I know," Elena replied. Not arrogant, just true. That evening, her teammates threw an impromptu celebration in her honor. Rodriguez made a toast to Brooks, who proved that Princess isn't an insult, it's a warning. Later, alone in her quarters, Elena pulled out her brother's Trident medal. She'd carried it through BUD divided by S, through Hell Week, through every deployment. It had been her reminder of why she'd started this journey. "I did it, Tommy," she whispered. "I became what you knew I could be." For the first time since his death, the grief didn't feel quite so heavy. It was still there, it would always be there, but it was joined by something else now. Pride, peace, purpose. Elena Brooks wasn't running from weakness anymore. She'd transformed it into her greatest strength. 6 months later, Elena received an invitation that surprised her. Would she be willing to speak at the Naval Special Warfare Command orientation for prospective BUD divided by S candidates? She accepted. The auditorium was packed with hopefuls, men and women ranging from 18 to 35, all of them wondering if they had what it took. Elena stood at the podium in her dress uniform, her trident gleaming on her chest, and looked out at the sea of nervous faces. She saw herself in every one of them. "My name is Petty Officer Elena Brooks," she began. 3 years ago, I stood where you're standing. I was scared. I was small. On my first day of training, I couldn't even load a magazine because my hands were shaking so badly. 6 Marines watched me and laughed. They gave me a nickname, Princess. The room was utterly silent. That nickname was meant to break me, to remind me that I didn't belong, that I was too weak, too soft, too female for this world. And you know what? It worked. I went back to my quarters that first night and cried until I couldn't breathe. Elena paused, meeting eyes around the room. But here's what those Marines didn't know, and what I didn't know at the time. Strength isn't the absence of tears. Strength isn't pretending you're never afraid. Strength is standing up after you fall. It's showing up the next day even when everything in you wants to quit. It's transforming your worst moment into your greatest motivation. She told them about Hell Week, about the freezing water and the hallucinations, and the moment she almost gave up. She told them about her first mission, about taking a life to protect her team. She told them about facing those 6 Marines again and using everything they'd taught her to doubt herself as fuel to prove them wrong. Some of you will ring out, Elena said. That's okay. BUD divided by S isn't for everyone, and there's no shame in recognizing your limits. But if you quit, quit for the right reasons. Don't quit because someone said you couldn't do it. Don't quit because you cried once. Don't quit because you had a bad day. A young woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. How did you know you could make it? I didn't, Elena answered honestly. Even during Hell Week, I wasn't sure. But I knew I'd regret not trying more than I'd regret failing. And that made all the difference. After the speech, dozens of people approached her with questions. The young woman from the 3rd row was among them. I'm terrified, the woman admitted. Everyone tells me I'm crazy for even attempting this. Elena smiled. Good. Use that terror. Let it push you forward instead of holding you back. And remember, someone once called me princess as an insult. Now it's of my legacy. What's meant to break you can become what defines you. The story of Princess spread beyond the military. It became a touchstone for anyone who'd ever been underestimated, anyone who'd been told they weren't good enough. Elena received letters from women in corporate boardrooms who kept her picture on their desks, from teenage girls who'd been bullied, from men who'd struggled with their own doubts. She answered as many as she could, always with the same message. Your worth isn't determined by who doubts you. It's determined by what you do despite that doubt. On the anniversary of completing BUD divided by S, Elena returned to the beach where she'd endured Hell Week. Dawn was breaking over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. She stood in the surf zone, feeling the cold water around her ankles, remembering what it had felt like to stand here for hours, shaking and miserable and certain she couldn't last another minute. But she had lasted. She'd lasted through all of it. A group of BUD divided by S candidates jogged past on the beach, their instructor calling cadence. Elena recognized the look on their faces, exhaustion, determination, fear, hope all mixed together. One of them, a woman running near the back, caught sight of Elena's trident and straightened slightly, finding some reserve of energy she didn't know she had. Elena nodded to her. Keep going. You're stronger than you know. The candidate nodded back and pushed forward. As Elena walked back to her car, she thought about that scared 20-year-old girl who dropped a magazine and earned a humiliating nickname. That girl had felt like the weakest person in the world. She'd believed everyone who said she didn't belong. But that girl had also possessed something no one else could see. A core of absolute steel, wrapped in tears and fear and doubt. It had taken Hell Week to forge that steel into something useful. It had taken 3 years to prove it to the world. Elena Brooks Princess was a Navy SEAL, and she'd earned every single bit of that title, one painful, tear-stained, triumphant step at a time. The legacy wasn't just about physical strength or combat prowess. It was simpler and more profound than that. You don't have to stop being human to become a warrior. You don't have to hide your tears to prove your worth. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time, until the person you were afraid you couldn't become is the person staring back at you in the mirror. That was the real meaning of princess. Not an insult, not a weakness. A reminder that strength comes in forms people don't always recognize until it's standing in front of them. Unbreakable and undeniable, earning respect one hard-won battle at a time.